Hey there, party people of YouTube. Welcome to NRW Video. I'm your host with the most, Mr. David, and I'm here with my buddy from another nutty, preferably from the left-hand side, my boy, my man, Mr.
Guys, what's up, guys? Thank you very much for joining us here.
Hey, guys.
As you know, we are doing our part 2 for the remaining top 5 of our top 10 Sly Stallone films here. So without further ado, let's get right into it here. We're going to have Mr. David himself start off with his number 5. So, Mr. David?
All right, more than happy to. Glad we got to the final bit. It was a lot easier going backwards on this one than it was going forward. So my top 5 is probably one of his lesser known films. A little bit right after Rocky and after Empire, actually.
Empire.
Oh yeah, you'll see. Empire Strikes Back, sir, because his co-star was Mr. Billy D. Williams in this movie. And this movie was kind of ahead of its time for the story that it had regarding, a terrorist group and an evil a villain that was trying, to terrorize the city. And you know what? It was a really gritty film, and it had like that weird, gritty kind of 70s, 80s style to it that just kind of really made it work for me. And you really get to see Stallone out of his working a different character. Yes, another cop character.
Yeah.
But the intensity, the chemistry between him and Billy D. Williams, and not to mention an amazing antagonist played by Mr. Howard, who really made that movie kind of work through and really made that role.
So what film are you talking about here? Because I don't think you dropped the name of the film.
I don't think I've dropped it because I'm talking. It's Nighthawks. Number 5 is Nighthawks.
So yeah, okay. So I knew what you were talking about, given the plot here. So Nighthawk. Okay, so that's your number 5.
That's my number 5.
Okay, that's an interesting position there for a film of that caliber.
I told you why. So I mean, that's exactly why it's my number 5.
Okay, well, I like the fact that you said something that was very interesting when you mentioned that it kind of has that 80s, 70s vibe to it. Seeing that film, because the movie came out in 81, so it still had a little bit of that 70s vibe left over into the film because the 80s hasn't really gotten its identity yet. So I like what you described there, kind of that slow, leftover 70s vibe to it with the introduction of the 80s element into it. So good observation there. All right, so that is your number 5. Interesting. Okay. All right. So let me start with my number 5 then, which I know may turn a few heads here, but hey, for me, my number 5 is actually Rambo: First Blood Part 2. Granted, I understand, as we talked about it before in the previous video, that First Blood is by far the better film. There's no doubt about that. I have no arguments that it is. But this was the first Rambo film that I saw, and it was pretty much my introduction of my admiration of Stallone as an actor, primarily as an action hero. So this film does hold a very special place in my heart as far as nostalgia purposes, but it is, I think, for me, it is my favorite of the entire series because it has everything that I loved about the first film, but it just went up, 10 notches at this point. And that ending with First Blood Part 2, where you kind of have a little bit of a repeat of the first part of the film, where he just talks about having the country love the soldiers as much as the soldiers love the country, and they'd be willing to die for it. It's got to be the most patriotic scene ever in movie history there. So holds a very special place in my heart. I know some people may disagree with it on that, but hey, that's my number 5 pick there. So let's roll over to your number 4 here. What do you have here for us at number 4?
Number 4, I have Copland.
Interesting. So do I.
Hey, there you go. Oh, nice.
All right, awesome. So since we have Copland as a number 4 here, so let's hear your thoughts on the film and why you have in that position.
Just one again. We mentioned this earlier, and I think in another film, when Stallone has a passion project or something he's into, you can tell by the work he does in the movie.
Yeah,
you can tell it's just kind of like, he did it just for the check. You can tell that kind of movie. But for this one, you could tell it was a passion project. He took a pay cut. He actually, gained weight for the role. And it's just a role that we don't really normally see him in. Yes, another police officer, another cop role, yes. But to see kind of play this kind of a mild mannered, sheriff.
A submissive character, if you will.
Exactly. It's just a submissive character. And then eventually see him get built up. It had like this Walking Tall feel to it, especially near the end. And again, it's one of those movies that it was such an ensemble cast as well,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it really played well. And even though Stallone was kind of like one of the main characters, he didn't really steal the scene, but he kind of his character and his acting throughout really kind of helped carry the film. Even though he was playing, along with heavy hitters like Ray Liotta and others.
Harvey Keitel. Yeah.
Exactly. So I mean, it really shone for me. He really thought he really enjoyed this role, and
Yeah.
he really brought it to life, and it was believable. And I know you had some stunts about somebody playing another character. You just wouldn't. You did.
Right. So initially, Stallone wanted to play the part that Ray Liotta had played in the film because I believe he's found that character much more interesting. But I believe the director James Mangold, who's famous for doing Logan, the Wolverine, and the upcoming Ford and Ferrari film, he had recommended for Stallone to be playing the part of Ray in his film, and I can't imagine anyone else playing that part other than Stallone, having seen the film as many times as I have. But at the same time, I can't imagine Stallone playing the part that Ray Liotta had played because there's such an intensity that character had that I don't even know if Stallone could even match that. Not to say that he wasn't capable of doing it, but Ray Liotta had a certain style of acting that fitted very well for this character. So it's kind of hard to imagine anybody else other than Ray Liotta for this part. But regardless of that, I mean, you mentioned before an ensemble cast. You could say that if one actor wasn't there, could someone else do it better? It's kind of hard to say because everyone has done a great job, and although certain actors weren't really heavy in the film, like Robert De Niro, for example, when he is in the film, and you see Stallone and De Niro acting together, they actually kind of complement each other in terms of what the characters' motives are and so on. So everyone does a fantastic job, and this is one of his most underrated film. And I think I might have mentioned before to you in private conversation that this film was released during the summer, and yes, they promoted the film in a like this action type of cop film, when in reality it was the furthest from that. So
kind of slow burn build up to the action.
Yeah,
it was kind of a character piece, if anything.
Right.
Even to the point like the town was its own character. Like honestly, like you really gonna get a sense of it's like a small town type of story. You got a sense of these side characters and these throwaway characters, but you had the main characters. The cast kind of put the whole thing together.
Right, and it was more like a Western than it was really like a cops. Well, even though there are cops in it, but it kind of felt like a Western. You have that one sheriff in town who's supposed to just be the babysitter, and then you have everyone else, really the guys who are working at another in New York City, the police department. They're pretty much running the town. There's a wonderful backstory about how they all got there and how they were able to kind of keep themselves afloat and keep everything in a really tight community. So it's a wonderful story, and one of his most underrated performances that not many people saw. And do you think that he could have earned an Oscar had it been done with the right promotion under the right release dates?
Maybe there was also some like screenwrites and stuff that I kind of want to see. Like with a lot of these films, there's either rewrites or reshoots or whatever. Because there was some issues with the movie again, or it kind of like took a while for it to be made, or some production. So who knows what kind of film we could have had? Even though that, as a testament for the movie even coming out and being as good as it is, really shows. I thought maybe a later release, maybe in the winter, maybe would have done a better job and kind of getting some more attention, kind of give it some more press. But I enjoyed the movie. That's why it's my number 4. My number 4.
All right. Well, I'm glad you said that here too, because so for my number 3, this is by far my favorite action film of all time, and I think you know what film I'm talking about here, because this was everything that I always envisioned of what an action hero should look like. And when I saw this film and seen Stallone in that attire, I was like, this is my man. This is what an action hero should look like all the time. And I'm talking about Demolition Man. My favorite action film of all time, and my third favorite Stallone film of all time too.
Demolition Man is number 3.
Okay, awesome. Because I want to know when was the first time you saw the film here? Do you remember?
Like most of my cinema runs, I have to blame my older siblings for this. My older brother for this one. He actually went and got the Columbia House cassette VHS like catalog and just started ordering movies. And Demolition Man was one of the ones. And that was the one we constantly played like over and over again, just because of how like how fun it was, you know, and going into it, you know, because I was a fan of Universal Soldier,
Yes.
Platoon, oddly enough, like,
Yeah.
you know, the kids movies I'm watching as a kid, you know, watching these crazy action flicks, the
Yeah.
Terminator, stuff like that. So when I saw Demolition Man, it just looked like another cool action flick I wanted to watch. So I pop it in. That's what you first get, and it takes
Yeah.
this weird left turn, and
Yeah.
I loved it. It was so weird.
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, I thought the film was pretty good at commentating on, like, I guess, society, if you will, and how the world is going to be changing in the future. And in some ways, it kind of have some similar, I guess, prediction, if you will, of how the future will be running at this point in time of our lives here. So, I mean, when you look at the film now, do you look at some stuff and think, you know what, that's kind of what's happening right now here too at this point in our lives? Like, do you kind of pick that up?
It is, and it's kind of funny because like the '90s are coming back now. You have like that
Yeah.
nostalgia revival going on now, and it's kind of what the movie was kind of hinting at too. It's kind of like things from the past that come back and make it big in the future. You have the jingles, the cereal, Taco Bell, you know. So it's one of those things. Like this film has so much going for it. It had the action, it had the comedy, it had
Yeah.
the references, and it's so quotable. Like to this day, I kind of still, you know, say, "What's your boggle?" You know, like, you know, it, it's one of those movies that like, and even then, Sandra Bullock really kind of played that perfect character of
Yes.
such at the '90s and being
Yeah.
such at that. It just worked, and it's very very kind of reminiscent of what's going on today too. So it's kind of really cool to kind of see that contrast.
Yeah, I agree with you on that too. And you also have, like, you mentioned about Sandra Bullock. You have a bunch of other actors as well too. Rob Schneider's in there, Benjamin Bratt. I can't forget Wesley Snipes being the main villain in this film. And
Dennis Leary.
is fantastic. Oh, and Dennis Leary as well too. Yeah, I mean, you've got a group of actors there that you forget that Stallone has worked with. You know, he's worked with some legit actors that were in the beginning of their career. Sandra Bullock being, this is one of her beginning starring or co-starring roles, if you will, because in the following year she ended up doing Speed. So she did one big action film into another bigger action film. I mean, she was on a roll. So this was like a point in time where you get to see these actors kind of be coming into their own, if you will. And yeah, man, this movie, I enjoy every minute of it. Like, this has everything that I've always wanted in an action film. You had, you know, the strong lead versus the strong villain, and they're just going toe to toe with one another. I mean, you can't get any better than that. And a hero name such as John Spartan, how you can't get any better than that. Stallone, when it comes with his hero names, 90% of the time he's got, you know, he's right on the money when it comes to the lead names, with the exception of Barney Ross, which is a whole nother story on its own. But that being said, though, man, all right, well, I'm glad that you had your Demolition Man is number 3 here for you.
Talking about his co-star, Wesley Snipes did a fantastic job as Phoenix. Like, I mean, the chemistry between these two, you know, like the chaos and order, like it just kind of showed off throughout the film, the showdown finally. And then the ending where, like, you know, they're kind of going at it. And one of the most famous, my favorite film part of the film was like when they're like going at it in like this, like, it wasn't a museum, but it was kind of like
Oh, it was a museum.
it was like a museum on a dig site too, because it was like an old area from the old Los Angeles.
Yeah. They I think they kept like an actual scene or an actual, I guess, street corner that they either replicated or they actually took it from that era and put it into this one area in the museum where people can just look down from a glass, and they happen to break right through it during that whole action sequence there. So that's actually pretty fantastic. And not to make this not to be immature about it here, but every time I see this movie, I can always say that this is the only film that I can think of that you actually get to see Stallone's balls. And that was in the beginning of the scene where he's been when he's being put in that container where he's going to be frozen. I swear to you, I remember looking and I was like, I think I just saw his balls. Like, holy shit! Now I can honestly say that I've seen Stallone balls.
I thought you were talking about the 3 seashells. No, we just Stallone balls.
Yeah, well, I mean, not that I'm going to look for that sort of stuff, but I'm just saying, I just remember watching and I'm thinking, like, I think I saw his balls, and I'm not gonna lie, I was like, yeah, that's his balls, and I just kept forward. So yeah, you know, I've literally seen the man's ass, which we've seen in Tango and Cash, and I've seen his balls. The only thing I haven't seen is his dick. So, once I seen all that, I've completed the circle. I can die happy. I'm just kidding.
That's a whole nother movie that was not fit enough to be on this list.
All right,
So,
well,
on that note, number two. What's your number two?
well, my number two is a film that you've already have in your rankings lower in the table here. It's Nighthawks for me. You pretty much touched upon what you loved about the film, and so did I. Of course, I rank it a little bit higher because I really believe this is one of his most underrated films. You mentioned Billy D. Williams, Rutger Hauer, who's the main villain of the film, who is. If you kind of look at it, it's almost like a Batman film. If you think about it, you have Stallone playing a cop who's out to chase this terrorist here, and then the terrorist is causing chaos throughout the city. So it's it kind of reminded me because I didn't think of it then when I saw The Dark Knight, but upon watching this film, it reminded me, oh, this is almost very similar to The Dark Knight, and this comes out way before The Dark Knight. So in a lot of ways, I'm always curious if Christopher Nolan, his brother Jonah Nolan, had taken inspiration to some degree from Nighthawks, because it kind of almost had the same type of.
Yeah, I kind of see that.
Yeah, so I thought that was very interesting. So, although I will have to say though that this is, I think, not that this is relevant here, but this is the only time that I ever remember seeing, apart from Rocky IV, where you actually have Stallone have his beard grown out to that extent there, which I thought was kind of interesting, because you've never really seen him in playing a character so gruffed up and so edgy at the entire time. And his performance in this film is pretty much almost nearly flawless for me. And I wish a lot of people go out and go out of the way to check this film out, because it is really well done, and it's certainly worth the viewing pleasure, because it's a hidden gem that most people don't even know exists. If you're a Stallone fan, you should watch this film, and I'm sure you can agree to make those recommendations too.
I do.
All right, so as my number two here, what is your number two?
My number two, which I'm surprised that it wasn't your number two or anywhere higher on this list for you, or even on this list, because you just said this is the better film. First Blood is my number two. So I'm a little surprised that this movie did not show up at all on your list.
Oh, it did actually. Remember, it was
well, I mean, higher on the list.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
On this list, like on the top five. I would assume it'd be on your top five at least.
Yeah.
But that's cool. But for me, it's one of his breakout roles besides Rocky. Balboa. John Rambo was his like big role.
Yeah, that's true.
And the fact that he has such little dialogue, was able to carry the movie throughout, and then kind of show his physicality, show his acting chops, especially at the end, where he makes that speech and kind of breaks down finally about how he feels about coming back and being mistreated and being pushed and not being taken care of. That really hit home. Like, this guy can act. And then the fact that this movie's kind of part of my childhood, because I was constantly watching it like almost every other Friday. But it's one of those roles that kind of sticks out. When you think of Stallone, you either think Rambo or you think Balboa. Yeah. So, I think that's why it's my number two, because it's the one of the other franchises that you could think of when you hear of Stallone. Yeah, that's true. I'm not going to dispute that with you at all, man, because I have to admit I do agree with that. I probably should have had it. Well, I should have had it a little bit higher at my rankings here, but it's, you've got a lot of hidden gems that he's done that most people don't recognize, and in some cases they were the better films, but you can't argue that First Blood was not considered one of the better films. It is definitely one of his best roles out there. Obviously one of his most memorable too. And also, it kind of helped carry the movie as well. It kind of helped carry that story and the exposition and all that regarding Rambo. But man, he literally carried that character. Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely one of his most toughest roles he's ever had in making the film. I know there's a sequence in the film, if you remember, where he fell off the tree and then he lands on a branch. You see he's screaming in pain. So that actually was real, where he landed on a branch and he broke his rib and he's screaming in pain. And the fact that they kept that, he was continuing to roll with it here, shows you the guy was committed. Plus, they were shooting in British Columbia, I believe, and even though the town takes place somewhere in the USA, but he shot the film during winter, and so when he's out there running with just a tank top or no shirt at all, that is literally him out there in the freezing cold. So
props to him, man, because very few people would actually pull it off for that long, extended period of time. And I'm surprised that he's willing to come back and go through harsher conditions as the film series continues on from there, shooting in Thailand and then Afghanistan or wherever they shot the film at, and then out in Thailand again. It's the dude is dedicated when it comes to the character, especially when he's truly passionate about this being one of them. Yeah, man, I give you props. I give him props rather, because that dude is he's the best, I think. But all right, so we got our number 2 out of the way, and let's go with number 1. I think we all know what our number 1 is here, because
I think nobody can be surprised here. It's no surprise.
So our number 1 here is going to be Rocky.
Rocky.
There is no doubt in our minds that without Rocky, we would have never gotten the likes of Rambo, Cobra, Tango and Cash, Demolition Man. I mean, we can go on and on about that. And the fact that Stallone had written a wonderful character, a wonderful story at that, and quite frankly, one of the most near perfect films I've ever seen in my life. And this is by far one of my favorite films of all time, but it is my favorite Stallone film of all time. And I'm sure you can agree with this as well, too. We both have similar backgrounds where we've been introduced at a young age, and obviously the character and the story hooked us, and we've been enamored with this character here. And I mean, I don't know what else I can say. I mean, do you want to add on to that?
Yeah, as you know, like I had, we had this discussion with Point Guards where we had Rocky 2, but this is the start. This is what made Rocky. This is what started the franchise, and you kind of get to see, and for my opinion, I think one of the best sports movies. I still consider it a sports movie because it's a love story involving boxing.
Yes,
and that's kind of how the movie was pitched. I heard. I think it was this love story involving boxing, and it's such a great story. You kind of see where he starts off as kind of a not so good guy with the heart of gold, and then kind of you see him get molded into this as a better person, a fighter, and just a better individual all around. Especially for the climax at the end of the movie, though he may have lost the fight at the end of the movie. But he gained the hearts and the respect of not only his opponent, but the fans and his love interest.
Yep, I agree. What could you want? Yeah, I totally agree with you, man. And this film, I mean, without Stallone really going out of his way, because I'm sure you may have heard a story where he was going for an audition with the producers of this film for another project, of course, and he didn't get the part, but he happened to turn around and say, "Hey, I also write scripts too." And the guy said, "Okay, well, if whatever you got, bring him over to us, and we'll have a look at that." Had he not done that, there would have been we would have never seen the likes of Rocky at this day and age here, because, Stallone took a chance and speaking up, and it happened to be working to his favor. Granted, he had to go through a lot of hardships to be able to land the role for himself, but I don't know if we would have ever gotten the same caliber of movie that we've got now had he not fought for that. So. The man is smart. When he knows what he wants and he goes after it, you can get some wonderful performance. And Roger Ebert, I think at the time, had mentioned that he looked at Stallone. He saw him as probably the next Marlon Brando. And this film, among other films of that caliber, showcases that with his acting abilities here. Because he is when Stallone is in the zone, he is a very, very, very good actor. A great director too, phenomenal actor, great writer. I mean, the dude is a triple threat, and for him to be able to do all three at the same time, and not particularly in this film, but just having the experience to see through the franchises here, I mean, the dude is the best, I think, and that's why he's my favorite actor of all time. He does it all.
So, what about the movie kind of captured your kind of like, why is it your number one spot? Like, what one specific thing? Because, like, I mean, you have the cinematography is great, the action sequences are great, just the story, like it's like you said, almost a perfect film.
Yeah, I agree. Well, for me, I think what brought me to fall in love with the character was the fact that there were certain moments in the film that stuck out for me. Like, for example, the one scene where he's fighting Apollo Creed at the end. I think it was like the second to last round, where he's being knocked down by Apollo Creed. Apollo Creed's beating the shit out of the guy. Falls to the ground. Referee starts doing the 10 count. Rocky gets back up, puts the mouthpiece back in his mouth, and then Creed had thought he won the fight because he beat him down to death pretty much. And he's raising his arms up, just celebrating. And then his cornermen are like, turn around. He's getting up. As soon as he turns around, Rocky's getting right back on his feet. puts the mouth guard back in his mouth, and he just goes, "Come on!" And that reaction that Creed had when he saw Rocky come back up, he was just like, "Oh." I remember that moment as a kid, thinking like, "Holy shit, this guy was never going to stop." And then they brought that up too in Rocky 2, where Duke was talking to Creed. Says, "You know what I saw? I saw a man that you kept beating down to the point where no man should ever return, but he just kept coming and he kept coming. He wouldn't stop." That right there was when I saw Rocky 2. Maybe when I go back to watch this film, it made me realize that this character was never going to die no matter what. He was going to go to the death, and not even the best in the world could take him down. So that showed me a side of humanity that does exist, and I thought that was very a wonderful characteristic to have, and that's what I see in Rocky. Every time I watch the film, that's the moment that I realized that Rocky was a special person. Granted, he's fake, but that side of humanity that exists out there, we get to see that through a fictional character, and that certainly inspired me to go out for the things that I was normally afraid to approach. And that character certainly was a part of my childhood that makes me take that step out there. But I mean, that's for me there. But I mean, for you, do you have kind of that same sentiment as well?
Yeah, I mean, like it's those little moments. Of like it's kind of like the motivational speeches. Like it does, it doesn't matter how many times you get knocked out, you get back up and give it all your all. And movie also has this whole franchise has a special place in my heart because this is something that I watched with my family numerous times. And one of the major influences in my life was my grandmother, and she was obsessed with these movies. She watched every Rocky film like it was a freaking documentary, like, and when it came to the fight, she was watching like she was watching a real boxing fight. Like she'll get into it, like hit him, even though she's watched the movie over and over again.
Yeah.
You could hear like this 80 little, she wasn't little, like, this little badass 80-year-old in the living room screaming at the top of her lungs, like, go Rocky, like, hit him hard. And like,
I think it's great that you mentioned that because you've seen this film so many times and you still have that same emotional buildup where you're like, come on, beat him. You already know what's going to happen, but yet you still get caught up with the one. I mean, for me, that's a testament of how good the film really is.
Yeah. You still get an emotional reaction. It's such an emotional movie too. Like you have the lows, the highs, the love, and then even at the end, like even though he lost, the crowd coming up behind him, which is great, and it's just a great way to end the film. Amazing way to end the film.
And another thing about the character too that I also admire was the fact that he's hung around with a lot of I would say losers that most people would consider to be losers, and you also have a guy like Paulie, Adrian's brother, who was a bit of a jerk, but yet somehow throughout the entire turmoil, he's always remained polite and nice with a really rough around the edges type of character, and it shows you that Rocky understood the value of loyalty, the value of family. Which a lot of us I know have taken for granted, but clearly when you see that in a movie like this, you realize, you know what? I think there is a better place for us out there as long as we just learn to be patient with one another and learn to talk with one another and just be there for one another. So, not to get too preachy here about that stuff, but I mean that's something that I always take away from these films. And Stallone's performance is a testament of how good he is, because even to this day, when he goes over to Philadelphia, they don't call him Sly. They don't call him, hey, Mr. Stallone. It's, oh, Rocky, how you doing, Rocky? It's like that every single time.
And that's what it shows. Like these last two movies on our list, it kind of show the testament of these franchises and of these characters and how long they last. And what they pretty much have become part of, cultural Americana, especially Rocky. With at the end of the other movies, the flag and Apollo Creed and all that. It's very kind of, it's so
iconic. Yeah, I agree. It's iconic. Yeah, I agree. But all right, well then, so this is where we're at with our films here. I'm sure, I know you and I had some disagreements with where we rank our films, and I'm going to be the first one to admit I don't disagree with you at all. But these are films that, at certain points, upon reviewing them, that I realized that I learned certain things about the history of the film that kind of changed my perception, which made me appreciate the film a lot more.
Issues with pre-production, post-production.
Yeah, of course.
Half these movies even made it out.
Or even legacy of the films as well too. When you realize after all these years, you kind of learn to appreciate some new aspect of the film that you've never probably noticed before. Like I said, Rocky 2. When I heard that one sequence where that Duke had with Apollo, then upon seeing the film, this is years ago, of course, but when I saw the film again after watching Rocky 2, I was like, holy shit, he's right. And that completely changed my perception to a certain aspect of the
This
film.
is why we do those videos, because like even now, we're still learning about stuff we've already seen before. So
Yeah.
what do you guys think? Do you guys love it? Do you agree? Do you hate it? Do you want us to move some stuff around? Are you still mad at Rob for putting Rocky 2 so high on the list? I don't know.
You mean so low on the list? Because I've definitely put it way down there.
Just let us know. This is why we make these videos. If you like the stuff that we do, follow us here. Continue watching because we have more to come. Like hit that like and subscribe button down here. Besides that, we have plenty of other videos coming out. If you like what we do, make sure to check out what everybody else on the NRW crew does. Everything from comic books, movies, pop culture, and everything else.
Too. Yeah. We also do video games as well.
So, and hopefully check out for anything else that we have. If you want to follow us, you can follow me at David is Disaster at Twitter or on Instagram. Or you can follow me on Facebook as well. You can follow Rob, my buddy from Another Nutty here.
You can follow me here on Twitter at RobMedina0585, and you can also follow me on Instagram at Rob_Medina0585. And also be sure to follow NRW on social media as well too. We have a Twitter account at the NRW, and also on Instagram at New Release Wednesdays. So as David has mentioned before, be sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and share. And follow us on our YouTube page here to check out these new videos we'll be posting up every other day here. So until next time, we thank you all for watching our video here. And until next time, cheers.
Cheers.
We'll be right back.